If you're an RIA or looking to become one, Schwab Advisor Services is the Watson to your homes. Smart, dependable, always has your back. It's no mystery why they're the number one choice for RIAs who want to be the ultimate solution for their clients. With all the wealth services, technology, and support your firm needs, the difference is so obvious. It's Schwabvious. Follow the clues at schwabvious.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the RIA Edge podcast. This is, as you, I think, know by now, my opportunity to speak to executives at registered investment advisory firms to try to understand how they're approaching growth. These are firms that are growing faster than the average RIA, and we just want to understand how they're doing it, how these decision makers are thinking about growth, and where they're finding their opportunities and how they're dealing with their constraints. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Alex Farman-Farmaian, the CEO of Compound Planning. Alex, thanks very much for joining us.
Great to be here, David.
Really appreciate it. It's an exciting story, an exciting firm. Before we jump into the details, maybe just for the folks who maybe are not as aware of Compound, can you just give us the 101, where the firm's located, clients, size of the firm, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So Compound Planning is both a technology company and an RIA. I'm based in New York City. The team is distributed across the country. We have about a little bit over 50 financial advisors spread across the country. And apologies, David, can you repeat the question, the second part of the question? Where we're located, just who we are?
Yeah. Just how do you describe Compound Planning to someone?
Got it. Yeah, so Compound Planning is both a technology company and an RIA. I'm based in New York City, but we have advisors across the country and a team distributed. We started the firm about 4 years ago and have grown substantially in that time. Today, we manage over $4 billion in assets and approaching that $5 billion mark pretty soon here. What we do that's a little bit different is we focus a lot on how to enable advisors to deliver white glove financial service across the entire balance sheet for clients. And so a lot of our growth has come from recruiting advisors that are working with a more complex client that care about giving advice, not just on the liquid portfolio, but also the illiquid portfolio.
Yeah, I think you refer to yourself as like almost a digital family office. Family office level services delivered purely online, purely digitally.
Yeah, and it's not to say we don't meet our clients face to face. Sure. When I think about the client-advisor relationship, it's a very human relationship, and that human aspect of it is really important. And so, while we're do a lot digitally to meet clients where they are, we still take that time to meet in person.
Sure. All of the services that you offer and the technology that you use, that your advisors use, is homegrown, correct? This is what I understand. You've basically built your tech stack yourself internally.
Yeah, that's correct. Kind of everything the client sees on the client experience side is home built. And then on the advisor experience side, we've built a platform that is that single pane of glass for the advisor to work through. Now, I'd be naive to say we're building and we're going to build everything from scratch. For example, we didn't build our own portfolio accounting engine, for example. And so we like to integrate and partner with best in class solutions where it makes sense. And so while we build a lot of that experience, we're still working with various partners across the board because, we can't build everything from scratch and do it all to the level of excellence that we expect to deliver to clients.
This obviously is not at all pejorative, and this is not what you are, but obviously we've gone through the era of the robo-advisor, right? That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking, I guess we used to call them kind of cyborg advisors in a way, right? Technology-assisted advisors. And I think the idea is that building your tech stack, or at least keeping most of your tech stack in-house, is a solution to what a lot of advisors who deal with disjointed tech stacks that don't talk to each other requires a lot more work from the advisor. I wonder if you can speak a little bit about this, your philosophy around the digitally enabled advisor in terms of efficiency and capacity for client work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the world we're living in now, technology is evolving, and it's evolving very, very quickly. If you look at the Kitces map, there's just so many companies out there, and there's so many different solutions, and it becomes a lot to deal with. And there's a huge cognitive load on the just switching costs between, moving from one screen to another and one workflow to another. And so, when we think about our platform, Advisor HQ is what we call the advisor platform. We spent a lot of time integrating some of those tools so the advisor can focus on what needs to get done for their client. What's that next best action? And that happens a lot in our activity monitor, which is the surface area where we help the advisor understand what that next best action is. And so the result of that is really an advisor that's focused on their client, not focused on, okay, what do I have to do next? How do I piece these things together? And that's where I see a lot of value delivered, and that results in the advisor spending more time bringing in new clients and working with the clients they have and increasing capacity versus trying to figure out, okay, how do I take this next step to rebalance this portfolio, or what do I need to do next for this financial plan?
Yeah, that's interesting. The notion of technology being something that, if it's good, it kind of disappears into the background. You don't even notice it. I know you call yourself a technology firm and an RIA, and I think a lot of the founders there have technology backgrounds. Your advisors, however, are they obviously tech savvy to a degree, but you're not looking for advisors that are programming on their own in their free time or doing that, right? I mean, is the notion that the work platform Advisor HQ for the advisor so seamless and almost disappears into the background that they're not spending a lot of time as technologists, so to speak?
Exactly. The technology team and the advisor team, they partner closely. Our advisors are always giving feedback, sharing what they're working on, what problems they want to solve, and that drives the technology roadmap in a lot of ways. But the advisors themselves, they're not coding, they're not building those tools. Even with all these vibe coding platforms like Claude and OpenAI, the advisors aren't building and doing that. They're focused on their clients, and the technology is what enables that. I come from more of a software company background, and one thing I've always believed is that technology is only so good as what it actually delivers in terms of value for you as a user and what you're looking to accomplish. And what we're looking to accomplish is letting the advisors focus on that client relationship and spend their time there.
I know that some of your advisors have had time spent at some of other maybe similar places like Personal Capital and some of these other what we call digitally native advisory platforms. At the time, as I recall, it was Personal Capital. It was almost as if the advisor played the role of a call center employee, right? The client interacted with the platform, interacted with the technology, and then if there was a problem, or if there was a need, or if there was some kind of I want to make sure I'm pressing the right button on my screen here. Let me call somebody, and you get the advisor on the phone, and they can walk you through it. Is that sort of the model that we're talking about here with compound planning, or how do you view the client-advisor relationship in your context?
Yeah, so it's not quite like that, or at least that general advisor in the background mentality that we have. That client advisor relationship and that interaction is the center of what we care about. And so we're building tools for the advisor to engage more with the client, to do more with them. And so the advisor is enabled by the platform, and the client has a digital experience as well, but it's not oriented around kind of self-serve, and then an advisor's there to help you.
So when you are prospecting for clients, or your advisors are prospecting for clients, the relationship is with the advisor primarily. The technology enables it, but it's not the client bumping up against the technology and then occasionally accessing an advisor behind the glass.
That's correct. The advisors are working hands-on with their clients, and technology is what enables them to be proactive. The technology experience still brings clients to the table. I think we've built a really strong brand in this next generation high net worth segment, especially folks with equity compensation. And I think some of that stems from my backgrounds in equity compensation. And so, we get folks coming and say, hey, I really like having some of these tools at my fingertips, but I also want to have that strong relationship with an advisor that's proactive. Because ultimately, I believe the best client advisor experience is coming from an advisor that's proactive with their client, that's thinking ahead for the client versus being reactive.
So tell me then a little bit about the services that you provide. I know, and we'll get to the tax preparation thing in a minute, because I know that's a relatively recent addition, but the services straight out of the gate, financial planning around, particularly around like you say, equity compensation structures for clients that make it a little complicated, a lot of alternative investments, a lot of non-traded investment options, as well as, traditional equity bonds. Uh, Estate planning, is this something that also is in the platform?
Estate planning we do it through partnerships. But when I think about kind of the overall service offering, you use the term digital family office earlier, and I think that's a good broad term to kind of center around. The goal of the advisor client relationship is to deliver financial advice across everything in someone's financial life. And when I started working on this, the problem I was seeing was that advisors weren't equipped to give advice with the full context and full picture of what a client was dealing with. A lot of the tooling and the way kind of firms operated at the time were centered around, okay, let's look at your retirement accounts. Let's look at your cash flows, and kind of leaving out the more complex tax issues that dealt with, private assets that weren't going to be managed, weren't going to be billed on an AUM schedule. And so a lot of advisors would ignore that because the work that goes into that had to be all done in spreadsheets. And so for us, it was about bringing that all into one place, starting with giving the advisor visibility into that context, and then building tools on top of that so they could give advice, across that full balance sheet, and then, all the connected services. So if I think years into the future, like, what do we want to be? We want to be that single place for a client's finances across the board, no matter what that is. The first call from a client should be to their advisor, whether it's, how do I navigate a line of credit? I'm coming up on a liquidity event and I'm selling my business, or, my company is IPOing. Compound should be the first place that client goes. And that should be directly to their advisor, who has that context at their fingertips.
Yeah, it's interesting. Traditionally, wirehouse advisors had access to a lot of the stuff to do, securities-based lending or some more complicated structured products or structured financial solutions for clients. The RIA world was it didn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously changed recently. When you were out there looking for advisors, recruiting advisors, where are you finding them? Like I said, I know some of them I think are younger and came from the personal capital space, but where else? I mean, how are you finding the advisors to join the platform?
Yeah, we're bringing folks in from existing independent RIAs. We've had some wirehouse folks come on as well, and kind of when I think about the profile of an advisor that joins Compound and is excited to do what we're, to join what we're building, they are, I'd call them this like next gen advisor bucket. That doesn't necessarily mean age necessarily. They are experienced advisors that have worked with clients for a number of years. And what they care about is two things, I would say. One is growth, right? These people aren't ready to hang up and, hit the golf course while kind of managing a lifestyle practice. Like, these are advisors that are excited to continue working with clients and keep building their practice. The second piece I put in this purpose bucket. I think one thing I've noticed about great advisors is they have a lot of purpose with the way that they work with their clients. They care deeply about the success that the client has. And so when someone comes to Compound, that's something they're choosing to do because they believe the client experience that they can offer by partnering with Compound is greater than what they could offer before. And so that piece is, I don't think I can express enough how important that piece is, because we are both very advisor focused and client focused. And I think a lot of places will either say, hey, whatever the advisor wants is what we should do. And then you have 100 advisors doing 100 different things. And on the other end, you see, hey, we're going to just make a really rigid client experience. But what I've found is that when you enable the advisor to bring their personalization to the table for that client, you end up with a much better client experience, and you can start to scale that experience. But I do think that's really only become possible recently because of what these like large language models have been able to enable, to bring all these different pieces together.
Yeah, explain that to me a little bit, because I know you guys use AI also internally for the advisors. Explain to me how you're using AI. It's obviously it's not a tech podcast, but help me understand a little bit how you're using AI for maybe the advisor workflows.
Yeah. So AI today has just become such a powerful tool for advisors, and there's a million solutions out there now that are doing note taking and bringing kind of context from various channels into one place, and that's kind of central to using AI in kind of a modern RIA. Is what AI is really good at is bringing in context and making it accessible. So we we care a lot about the client profile and having their balance sheet and the context from their plan and the context from conversations all accessible. And then we use AI to help that advisor, basically to help surface what's that next best action for the advisor. And then we've also built some agents in the background that take that next best action and turn it into actual action. That all lives in what we call activity monitors, part of that advisor HQ platform, where the AI brings the next best action to the table, advisor reviews, and then it moves along with the agent to kind of complete that service action.
It's fascinating. The number of possibilities, right, that any client can, any path that they could go down. It seems like it's tailor-made for AI models to surface the best options, right? Out of all the variables that can possibly be, and all the context that's available through tax forms and any other kind of everything.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
Yeah. And I know this is not your purpose, and obviously the human relationship is primary. We get it. However, putting on your technology hat, could you see a time when we may have a fully enabled AI financial advisor?
I
Tricky,
don't
right?
think it's a tricky question. The could we and will we are two different questions. I think AI will enable financial advice at scale to a certain segment of the market. And I think it's a lot about that self-serve client that wants to be in the driver's seat. And those are the people today that aren't working with an advisor. But I think as someone's financial complexity increases over time, no matter how much context that AI has, the human as part of that is going to continue to be important. So on one end, I think AI can be very technically strong at solving specific problems, and I think it already is in some senses. But when you take the complexity of a human and understanding what actually matters to that person, and whose person's money you're managing, I believe that human is going to endure in that relationship and even become more and more important. But I think AI, as it gets better and better, will expand what that person can do for the client and help them customize more for them.
Yeah, it's interesting, and gives the advisors really more of a tools to bring forth solutions for that client. I'm thinking of estate planning here, because we hear talk about more and more RIAs bringing estate planning in house, doing more sophisticated tax planning, maybe using some trust structures for families, and the assumption, I think, amongst many people in the RIA world is that a lot of advisors out there wouldn't necessarily recognize a estate planning opportunity when it came across their desk in a regular conversation with the client, right? And the client might say something, might drop some news, might drop a little hint that something's going to happen or some situation has changed, and there may be a trust solution that is perfectly suitable for that situation, but the advisor doesn't necessarily recognize it. Is this a way to kind of, instead of putting the advisor through years of training to come up to snuff on tax and estate rules, rather the AI agent is going to surface that solution, and it's up to the advisor then to kind of mold it into a human communication for the client and kind of hold their hand as they walk through the process. Is that accurate?
I think that's a really accurate use case. Like when I think about that scenario, maybe an advisor is having a conversation, and just to run through a scenario, they're meeting with a client. The client's talking about this. They were an early employee at one of these, companies that's going public at, call it $1 trillion, just to use an exaggeration. And maybe the advisor is aware of qualified small business stock, and thinking, okay, cool, you've got tax-free gains up to a certain point, depending on your basis, and then then, you're paying capital gains on the rest. I see a world where kind of the AI co-pilot for that advisor can surface, hey, there's more complexity here we can navigate. Maybe there's some gifting strategies to EREV trusts to start stacking those trusts to increase that gain, that tax-free gain, for example. And there's so many nuances like that, whether it's estate planning or tax or financial products that might be relevant, and surfacing like the different opportunities to the advisor to then package up what, understanding that kind of that client sentiment and everything else going on will be really relevant and helpful to that advisor to show value to that client. And then also to that client at the end of the day, because they have a professional and expert evaluating these different aspects and the risks. There's not always one right answer. It really is there's multiple paths, and it really comes down to what's right for that client, even if they look the same on paper.
Yeah, and it really strikes me that in the not too distant future, I mean, every advisor is going to have to work with some kind of agent like this, right? Some kind of co-pilot like this, or it's just going to be left in the dust. I like you say, I mean, the power of this revolution that's going on, I think, is going to have a profound impact on how advisors work. And you guys are already there. Tell me a little bit about the tax planning or tax preparation service that you added recently. What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, so tax is a really important part of someone's financial life, and we work with a lot of I kind of bucket them as wealth creators, people that are still in the earning phases of their life, and they're seeing liquidity events and different kinds of revenue streams. And tax planning is, I believe, central to financial advice. And so if you're doing a lot of the planning work already, it makes a lot of sense to make it easier to kind of finish the work and do the compliance. And so we've partnered with a couple different partners on that side to make that process seamless for clients. And so we're not signing the returns as compound tax. We're partnering with a handful of select partners to do that.
Oh, I got it. Okay. So this is not under the same roof. It's a partner, external partner that's doing the.
Correct.
A lot of RIAs will say tax planning, fine. Tax preparation is a low margin, heavy workload business that they just don't want any part of.
Yeah, a lot of RIAs use it as I've seen a lot of RIAs use it as a loss leader to kind of bring in business. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case, but I think I'm still forming my opinion on whether tax compliance will be call it like low margin loss leader in the future. And I think technology is a tool that can move that forward pretty significantly. And I think there's a couple of folks in the space starting to build around that with that mindset.
Yeah, for sure. And important, right? I mean, obviously taxes have a far greater impact, I think, on client outcomes than tweaking a few basis points out of a factor tilt in a portfolio. But let's move over to the investment side, because I think you guys are doing interesting stuff there too. Probably more forward than most RIAs on the alternative side. Explain to me what your client portfolios look like, and are you using internal models and kind of putting everyone in these models, or is it are the portfolios bespoke for every client? How are you approaching investments?
Yeah, so I would say I'm not the biggest expert on our investment side, but I can speak high level to it. So Steve Dean's our chief investment officer, and his background as an economist. He was at the Fed for a long time and kind of worked at a large institutional manager previously. And the way we think about the investment platform is, Steve's doing his research. He's thinking about the macro, kind of setting views on the market, and he's constructing an asset allocation framework and portfolio out of that into a model. And so the advisors have access to that. And part of these views are, what else are coming down the pike, whether they're drawdowns or interval funds kind of built into those models. And so the advisors have access to that and then allocate their clients appropriately. So, someone's, call it like moderate on their risk tolerance, there's going to be a framework for that model, for that, moderate portfolio and a model for it. And the advisor can allocate to that and then personalize that in kind of the execution side. So, high level, we do a lot of direct indexing. the tax alpha there is tremendous, and we partner there. We've built a really strong partnership with the folks over at Canvas, and it was O'Shaughnessy Asset Management. Now it's Franklin Templeton, but they've been a great partner on that, helping us kind of personalize portfolios through that platform. And what that does is it lets us be more tax sensitive and be more thoughtful on tax, and able to do that at a really low expense ratio on that side for the client. And then, on top of that, alts will be part of that framework, depending again on client's goals and that advisor's understanding of that client.
Yeah, interesting. And what about the alternative side then? And you mentioned interval funds. Are those kinds of investments baked into the investment platform? I think a lot of RIAs kind of have it running on two separate tools, right? We kind of have to merge them together, the publicly traded, traditional tradable securities platform, and then the alts platform kind of off to the side that kind of gets tacked on. It sounds like you guys have a slightly different approach.
Yeah, we bring all that stuff together in Advisor HQ. So when the advisor is constructing the portfolio and kind of reviewing things, they don't have to bounce around between systems. And so that alts bucket gets built into that core. Again, depending on whether that's appropriate for the client. Not every client is going to have an alts allocation, for example. And so we think about bringing all this into one place, and then from a reporting side of things, the clients can see that all in their compound dashboard, side by side. So there's the alts that compound's managing for them, but if a client did an LP investment in some venture fund or private equity fund, they can still see all that in their dashboard, even if compound's not managing that for them. And now the advisor has visibility into that. It's not just about what compound's managing for them. They can look at the entire balance sheet for that person or that family.
That's great. I know we're kind of pushing up on our time here, but a couple more quick things. As the CEO there, what kind of metrics do you look at amongst your advisors to kind of get a sense of growth trajectory, or where you might need to add resources in the future? What are you looking at to trim the sails of the ship? What signals do you look for?
One of the things I look a lot at is what's the velocity of accounts being opened. I think it's not just a good leading indicator of growth, but it's who's coming on board, and are those accounts kind of matching up with our core client base. A lot of times I'm looking at aggregate in just really growth numbers, and then the folks that kind of lead the advisory team are looking a little more in the details with those advisors. But from my level, it's primarily growth focused.
And growth, obviously there's bringing on advisors from other RIAs or maybe some warehouses that already have some clients, maybe bring them along with them. Any organic growth strategies that you use or are looking at in terms of new clients walking through the door first time?
Yeah. So, I think about bringing advisors on with practices, and then what happens once they're here, right? Are they growing, and how are they growing? Are they growing through their own networks, or are they growing through leads that are coming from Compound directly? And I think it's a healthy thing to have a mix of both, right? If we're the only lead source, that's not going to be ideal. If we're not supporting that growth, that's also not a great thing, because where we, if we're just adding back office value versus enabling someone to kind of focus on their growth, we want to make sure we're seeing that growth up to capacity, of course. And so I think about kind of the organic growth as having a couple different channels. On one side, it's how are we enabling the advisor to bring in business, to generate referrals, to have content and materials when they meet someone out and about. The second aspect is I put in this brand bucket. Do we have a brand that resonates with the ideal client profile? Do we show a brand of excellence, complexity in the service offering, and really taking that complexity and simplifying it for the client? And the last piece is, are people coming to Compound just out of the blue? And so in that third bucket, we do get a lot of folks that just come to our website and sign up to use that dashboard, because we make that available for anyone. And they can connect their balance sheet, connect their net worth, connect their card accounts, and see their vesting schedules for their stock options. And that oftentimes can be nurtured and converted into an advisory relationship. And an advisor can also share that with a prospective client they meet as a way to start that relationship. Something we're seeing more recently that I'm really excited to invest more in is direct partnerships with these employers. We see a lot of communities built at employers. So when a company is going public, employees are in their Slack channels talking about who's a good advisor you're working with. And I want Compound's name to come up every time there, of course. But also want to start doing more personalization at the company level and partnering directly with those companies. And so that's something we're starting to do a lot more of this year.
That's interesting. How partnering with the company, maybe in terms of we can bring in some educational material for you to share with the employees, or lunch and learn things, or what does it look like?
Yeah, exactly around kind of the educational material. So before starting Compound, I ran kind of the tender offer business at Carta, and as part of that, we were helping companies execute on their liquidity events, doing these private tender offers and pretty large transactions. And so we'd build partnerships around this transaction to bring in advice for financial wellness. And so I want to be the first choice for these top companies that are either going from private to public or having private liquidity events, because it's such an impactful time for people. And it's where a lot of mistakes can be made. And it's really important to start that planning for it well in advance of that liquidity event, because if you get to the liquidity event and you haven't taken any action because you didn't think to, well, now you're in a tough spot from a tax perspective and going to end up kind of paying a lot more taxes than you probably should if you had done some planning.
So is it just simply a matter of going to HR departments, or maybe people that all of you have connections with professionally in some of these companies that perhaps have a liquidity event in the future, and saying, "Hey, can I share with you some material, or come in and speak to the employees?" Or I guess I'm just wondering how that works in practice to actually get the name in front of those folks in that section.
Oftentimes we're already working with a handful of employees in the company, and so we can use that as an introduction. And I think one of the important things is about showing expertise in that space. Understanding the plan documents, understanding the nature of these kinds of transactions, because they are quite complex, and a lot of advisors have never had exposure to kind of this private to public or staying private liquidity event. And so that expertise really shines through in the customization around that specific offering happening. And so, yeah, we're working through the employees to connect with the executives that are kind of running that. Sometimes it's HR, sometimes it's the stock administrator, sometimes it's the CFO or general counsel.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I know we're pushed up against our time here, Alex. I do want to thank you very much for joining us on the RIA podcast. I hope we can do it again soon, because I've got a lot more questions for you. I'm always afraid the time kind of just runs out too quickly here, but I know I'll also let you go. Thanks very much for joining us, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, likewise. Really enjoyed the conversation.
And thank you for listening to the RIA podcast.
If you're an RIA or looking to become one, Schwab Advisor Services is the Watson to your homes. Smart, dependable, always has your back. It's no mystery why they're the number one choice for RIAs who want to be the ultimate solution for their clients. With all the wealth services, technology, and support your firm needs, the difference is so obvious. It's Schwabvious. Follow the clues at schwabvious.com.